Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Don Lemon Show. I am joined by one of the sharpest legal minds, probably the sharpest legal mind I know, and a man of many, many hats. I have to read it off of a sheet of paper here because he does so many things. He's a host of Dan Abrams Live on NewsNation. He's the CEO and founder of Abrams Media, which owns Mediaite, which is celebrating its 15th anniversary. He has some sort of bottle company that reviews. I mean, Dan, just enough already, okay? Could you just don't take all the jobs.
Don, how does it feel to be an entrepreneur yourself now, right? I mean, like, it's a different world, right?
It is. It's a different world. I got to tell you, I like it. And I think I told you this before. It is terrifying and thrilling all at once.
Totally.
So I like it.
Love it.
You know, it's a shame that we don't really have anything to talk about, especially when it comes to legal cases.
There's nothing to talk about. There's nothing going on. You know, on my radio show, which is defined as the intersection between politics and law, I start the show. I'm like, nothing to talk about today, guys.
Nothing to talk about. Move along here. So, Dan, but seriously, let's talk about. Can we talk about what's going on in Lower Manhattan? Because I think the witness that everyone was waiting for, took the stand yesterday. And got questions from both the prosecution and the defense, and really just dropped some salacious details about the former president and their relationship, from sexual positions to what he was wearing and on and on and on. What's your reaction?
Look, I think that she is, as you put it, a salacious witness. She's a fascinating witness. She's not that important legally to the case.
Wait, what?
Yeah.
She's not that important? Why do you say that? She is. I mean, she's the hush money
right.
lady.
So think about it, right? The two things he's accused of most broadly are falsifying business records and the $130,000. The question becomes, why did he do it, right? That's part two, is did he do it in an effort to help his political campaign? So question one, falsification of business records. Question two, motivation behind doing it. She doesn't really present a ton of testimony about that. Now, remember, she happens before all of that. The falsification of business records and the deal happen after the sex. So the most important legal testimony that she offers is about the negotiation around the $130,000. How important was the campaign? Were they frantic about it, et cetera? But I'll tell you this. I think the Trump team has made the sex more relevant by denying it happened.
Yes.
They're saying
I agree with you.
Right? So
yes.
If you're talking about the negotiation around the $130,000, it's relevant whether it happened or not. It's a relevant factor in assessing the context around the negotiation. So if the Trump team, as in, other cases like this, where the person says, yeah, okay, I did it. It was a mistake. It was this, it was whatever. Then I would be telling you, I'm not even sure that the judge should have even allowed in a lot of the stuff about the sex. But because he's denying it, I do think it becomes a relevant issue.
Okay. Hold that thought. But I just want to know if things like, saying I spanked him with a magazine and all that, does that stick in the jurors' minds to say, this guy he's scummy or sleazy or whatever you want to say. So therefore he must have done something wrong.
No, I mean, look, that's what the defense wanted to argue, right? The defense basically made a motion for a mistrial to end the case after her testimony, basically saying the stuff she said was so prejudicial and so outside the bounds that this trial ought to end.
Yeah, Todd Blanche, who's the defense attorney for Donald Trump, said, and these are his words, it threw to the side the guardrails that Judge Merchan had established, and he wanted to, declare a mistrial.
Right.
Not going to happen. Didn't happen.
It didn't happen. Look, it's not a frivolous argument, but it's not a winning argument, right? Meaning I think that to get a mistrial, really high standard, right? You have a jury that's impaneled. You've gone through jury selection. You have to really demonstrate, some major misconduct, some major issue, and even the judge conceded that she went further than he would have liked. But that doesn't mean you reach the level of mistrial.
Well, I think it was a Hail Mary. Maybe the judge would say it's a mistrial, but he probably knew he wasn't going to say it. I'm not the attorney, you are. But don't you think that Blanche wanted to get it on the record later for the appellate court or the appellate process on appeal?
Absolutely. No, it's a smart point. No doubt about it. I mean, he may want to appeal this, but from their perspective, the ultimate win would be a delay, right? If they could somehow stop the case right now, that would be a huge win. But look, Don, just I've always been of the perspective that I think this case helps Trump no matter what the outcome is. Big picture. I mean, that's separate from the individual analysis of the witnesses, et cetera. And I know that there are a lot of people, and sort of goes to your question, right? Which is, do I think that it hurts him, that there's testimony that's raunchy about him, et cetera? I think that there's a small group of people, potentially people he needs, right? Independent suburban women who may hear some of it and say, ew. On the other hand, I would be surprised if any of them would say, oh my goodness, I had no idea. Yeah. This is the first time I've ever heard anything like
it's baked in. When you're talking about the National Enquirer, it's all kind of baked in. And some of those things we had heard, I think we had heard the magazine spanking before, we heard the mushroom thing before that she talked about, and several other salacious details. I mean, she was on Jimmy Kimmel and he had like a board, like a smorgasbord of mushrooms, right, to identify. So people have seen the sort of sleazy part of this. But the question is, though, when you said you believe it's helping him, I think that you're right. I think it's helping him, especially with his folks. I'm wondering if it's going to help him with the broader public, with independents. And I mean, to that point, it seems like he is also gunning to force the judge maybe to put him behind bars for a little bit, so then he can use that to say, look, I'm being mistreated, and look what they're doing to me. He believes that's going to help him politically.
So here's what people aren't talking about, right? There's something between the fine and putting him in jail, which is what will happen if something else happens. Right. It's not going to be jail. It would be home confinement at the luxurious Trump Tower. If I'm serious, if the judge were to get to that next level where he felt that Trump, and by the way, Trump has been pretty careful, right? He put something up and it must have been his lawyers who told him, take it down, take it down. He immediately took it down.
Yeah, that was yesterday. It was up for 30 minutes. He put it up saying he when they found out who the witnesses were going to be, that one of them was Stormy Daniels. We didn't have time to prepare for it. And so it's unfair. And his lawyers must have said, take it down.
And he did. My point is that he doesn't want to go to jail. He doesn't want, I mean, I know there are a lot of people talking about, does he want to go to jail? Look, and I do think that if that were to happen, it would help him politically, right? I think that an acquittal in this case, again, we got to move to the end of the case, right? Because right now we're getting into the minutia, this and that. But I think that a lot more people are going to focus on this trial when there's a result. And the result, acquittal, big win for Trump. Hung jury, big win for Trump. Somehow, if there's a lesser included offense like misdemeanor as opposed to felony conviction, I think that's a win for Trump. And even if he's convicted for a felony, he's going to position it as being the victim in a case that never should have been brought. And in this case, there is a legitimate argument this case never should have been brought. And so I think as a result, he wins politically on this case no matter what.
Here's the thing. There are no cameras in this courtroom. Just real quick, do you think there should be?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, good. I'm glad you said that, because this was in the record yesterday, but people didn't see the court, meaning the judge, said, I understand that your client is upset at this point, but he is cursing audibly and he is shaking his head. Sorry, it's a small print here. Visually, and that's contemptuous. It has the potential to intimidate the witnesses, and the jury can see that. Mr. Blanche says, I will talk to him. That's his attorney. Said, I'll talk to him. The court says, so I'm speaking to you here at this bench because I don't want to embarrass him. And he says, I will talk to him. The court says, you need to speak to him, meaning the judge. I won't tolerate that. I will talk to him. The court, again, small print. I'm reading from the record here. One time I noticed when Ms. Daniels was testifying about rolling up the magazine and presumably smacking your client, and after that point, he shook his head and he looked down. So anyways, that's in the record. It would be helpful if there were cameras in the courtroom, because then people could see all of that, because the jury, I'm sure, is watching and they can hear it. They're listening.
Well, and the reason I think it's helpful is it allows people to decide for themselves what they make of the case, right? Mm-hmm. Yes, we can read transcripts, but it is different to be able, there's a reason that jurors hear from live witnesses and not from transcripts, right? And the reason is because it allows you to decide on credibility. It allows people to help determine how strong a case do they think it is. That's what the jurors are doing. And I think in a case like this, that the public ought to be able to see and decide for itself what they make of the case.
Dan, I have some breaking news. Another Trump case that I want to talk to you about. Moments ago, the Georgia Court of Appeals agreed to review a decision by the Fulton County Superior Court judge who declined to disqualify District Attorney Fani Willis from the 2020 election case against Donald Trump because of a personal relationship that we have talked about, right, that she had with a prosecutor. Mm-hmm. Am I right to assume that this means that this case probably won't go to trial this year?
Well, this case wasn't going to go to trial this year anyway. But this will put the icing on the cake for why this case won't go to trial. Because remember that this is a case, this is a jurisdiction where they had a very high profile case recently that took, I think, 9 months for jury selection. Mm-hmm. Even if the case starts, jury selection in a case like this is going to take a long time in this particular jurisdiction, unlike in New York, where they were able to do it quite quickly. So this case isn't going to happen this year. And then it's going to pose a really interesting question, right? Let's assume Donald Trump wins the election. I think that the Supreme Court will determine, based on previous rulings in a Bill Clinton case with Paula Jones, that the Georgia prosecutors have to put the case on hold until 2029.
Until 2029? 29?
Yeah, until after he's no longer president.
What if he's not president?
Oh no! Then if he's not, if he doesn't win, the case goes on, and I think we'll have a trial in 2025.
But if he becomes president, then he will not suffer the consequences of this as long as he's president, and then he's not going to want to leave office after that. He's going to try to stay president as long as possible. Oh my gosh! This is
the federal cases will go away, right? You separate the federal from the state, right? Federal will go away. This New York State case will have been resolved in one way or another, and the Georgia case, which is a big one, will likely be postponed, because one of the reasons that the Supreme Court allowed Bill Clinton to be deposed in the Paula Jones case is they said it's a civil case, it's a deposition. This would be very different if it was a criminal matter, which would really, the argument goes, distract the president from his duties as president. And so I think that's what they would determine in the Georgia case. And as a result, I think it would be pushed to 2020.
If I was on the radio like you, and I had a radio show like you on Sirius XM, the Dan Abrams show on Sirius XM, that's what I would be talking about today. Do all of these, is it looking more and more like Donald Trump will walk away from this without facing any jail time or any consequences? And I would say the answer may be yes. Oh,
there's no doubt. I mean, think about it. You've got, look, I've never thought the Georgia case was going to happen before 2024, but now, as you point out, with this acceptance, a willingness to hear the case, I don't think there's a chance that the Georgia case is going to happen.
But let me bring one other case up, because are you going to go to Judge Eileen Cannon?
Yes.
Because I'm just going to tell you about that. Let me tell the viewers about that, and then you can weigh in. Eileen Cannon has indefinitely postponed Trump's Florida classified documents trial pending resolution of multiple pending pretrial issues. Again, this is another delay tactic. So the trial had been scheduled to start on May 20th, but now it's looking like it's not going to happen before. She is a Trump appointee. Is this blatant, delaying in Donald Trump's favor?
So I'm going to answer that question, but I'm going to first put a caveat on it, which is that I don't think it's because she's a Trump appointee. There are a lot of Trump appointees who I think have done a very good job as judges. It's not because someone's a Trump appointee doesn't make them necessarily biased to Donald Trump. Okay. With that caveat.
This is a classified documents case, by the way. Go on. Sorry.
This is the classified documents case. I think that there are real arguments to make about Eileen Cannon making rulings which seem bizarrely helpful to Donald Trump. Now, that doesn't mean that she's, being paid off or she's this or she's that. I just think that there's a reason that she's already been overturned once by the appellate court, which is a very conservative court there, on a ruling she previously made in this case. And she has been slow rolling this in a way that doesn't really make sense. Mm-hmm. Now, there are issues to resolve. I mean, there's new issues that have come up about exactly how the classified documents were situated in the boxes, and have the prosecutors been straight with the defense about where items were located in the boxes, were they moved in an effort to scan them, and this and that. These are real issues when it comes to the sanctity of the documents. But it shouldn't mean you need to keep pushing the case months and months and months away. You can resolve a lot of these issues relatively quickly, and the judge ought to be doing that, and she's not. And so I think that in conjunction with the spanking she got from the 11th Circuit previously, it's fair to ask questions about Aileen Cannon's objectivity.
Is the Supreme Court slow rolling as well?
Yeah, I think they're slow rolling it a little bit, but I'm a little more protective of the Supreme Court in the sense that I think that it's critical that we not lose faith in the court. And I think the court has ruled against Republicans in a variety of cases. But yeah, I think that the court certainly could be moving this case more quickly. And there's no doubt that the court is not going to rule that a president has absolute and total immunity for anything he does. Even Trump's team, for the first time, conceded, well, we're not actually arguing that anymore, even though Donald Trump continues to argue that publicly. They're basically just saying for official acts. And the question now becomes, what's the definition of an official act?
Yeah. Then that's complicated. We don't have enough time to talk about that. Dan, in the time that we have left, I've thought about you a lot over the last couple of months, just because of the stories that were in the news or came back into the news. The Supreme Court, we were just talking about the Supreme Court. It made me think about what happened with you standing on the courthouse steps with Pete Williams. Do you remember what I was talking about?
Yes.
So, trying to figure out what a hanging Chad was, and blah, 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 blah. And of course, then, I think the first high profile case that I remember you from was O.J. Simpson. And I think that was your first high profile case.
It was.
And he died last month. He passed away last month. Do you have any reflections on that case? How did that impact your career? Do you think you'd be the Dan Abrams you are now without the O.J. Simpson case? No,
absolutely not. I mean, that case was critical in my career. And I had a lot of mixed emotions when I heard that, O.J. had died. Look, I ended up talking to OJ a lot in the hallway during the civil case, right? He's free. He's now testifying. He's there at the civil case. So I spent a lot of time with him in the hallways, chatting with him. Now, I say that not to say, oh, I miss him. When I heard that OJ died, the first people I thought about was, oh, I wonder how the Goldmans and the Browns are going to react. That's what my initial thought was. I've always believed, and I'm convinced, that OJ was guilty. And he was found responsible in the civil case. And the civil case really put to rest anyone. If you watch the civil case, because OJ had to testify, any questions that anyone had about his guilt were resolved in the context of the civil case.
I wouldn't wear those ugly ass shoes. And then there's a picture of him wearing them on the sideline from
8 months before. Yep.
Yeah. As he's hosting doing sideline reporting for the NFL. But
Yep.
Crazy.
And so look, so and there is part of me, and I've said this, that feels odd, right? That I made my career on the murders of two people. Yeah. I mean, there's something kind of messed up about that.
Well, that's your job. And as an attorney, especially as a defense attorney, you have to represent people, or attorneys, meaning everyone overall, not just you. Yeah. You have to represent people who may not be good people. But you're tasked to do it.
Look, Johnny Cochran became a really good friend of mine after the case. We hosted a show together. I was convinced OJ did it. I think Johnny knew OJ did it. But just because he represented OJ Simpson didn't mean that I couldn't be friends with Johnny Cochran.
Yeah. Let's talk about some other stories that are in the news. I don't know if this is a legal issue. It may become a legal issue. I'm not sure, but I want to ask you about Kristi Noem. And I think we've talked about poor cricket enough. I want to talk about the newer scandal in this, and that is whether or not she really met Kim Jong-un that she wrote about in her book, and then she had to excise it, take it out of her book because she said, "Oh, it was just an anecdote that should not have been in there. I didn't know it was in there," but yet and still she had read the audio portion of the book that had the anecdote in it. So I don't know. It seems now even that conservative media have even turned on her.
Oh, and that's been the interesting thing to me, right? I was wondering when I first heard that Kristi Noem had talked about shooting her puppy. I was like, wow,
yeah,
that's dumb.
Mm-hmm.
But I was like, I wonder, she's very popular. In this politically divided world we live in, are her peeps going to turn on her for that? Or are they going to somehow try and defend her? And they've pretty much turned on her, right? There has been no forceful.
They tried. Sean Hannity tried at first. There were a couple who tried
to. What did he say?
He just said, I don't know if it's true. He was just sort of giving her the benefit of the doubt and kind of just soft pedaling the interview. And then I think after the Kim Jong-un thing, and then after realizing that she had done the audio version, she had read, the book for the audio version herself.
Yeah.
I have not seen another interview with her with Hannity, but he tried to, give her some.
That's possible. But she's, look, last night she canceled on Greg Gutfeld on Fox News, and Gutfeld did a mock interview as if she was there mocking her. It's like, she's got no real support anymore. And, the Kim Jong-un thing, she could have survived. Shooting her dog, I can, as you know, Don, I host a live police show called On Patrol Live on Friday and Saturday nights. And we follow police departments in real time, right? When we see something happen to a dog, be it a canine who's officially working with the police, or some pooch that someone had that someone gets arrested and then the dog is there, the audience cares. They are obsessed with the animals. They want to
care more about dogs than humans.
It's true.
Yeah,
it's like true. They want to make sure that dog is okay. A cop cuts his finger while breaking a window. Okay. A dog has a little cut because the dog got cut in some jagged window. The audience is going to want to know about the dog. They want to make sure that the dog is okay. So this notion of thinking that it was going to be okay for her to confess this is insane.
Do you think she's toast? Because now I hear the short list now is narrowed to Marco Rubio, Tim Scott, Doug Burgum, and J.D. Vance. She's off of the list, right? There's if you shoot a dog and you admit it, you have no.
And here's the other thing, Don. When it comes to the Trump picking a vice president, people are saying, well, is he going to pick a loyalist or is it? Everything is riding on this for Donald Trump now. When we talked about those trials, if he doesn't win the election, those federal cases are going to move forward.
Right.
And so everything is riding on this. And I think as a result, Donald Trump is going to make the smartest decision he possibly can to try to win.
I want to talk about the person in the Abrams family who I like and admire and respect the most, and who's obviously the most handsome, and that is Floyd Abrams. You sat down with him on your NewsNation show. You talked to him about the First Amendment. I know that this issue is very important for you and for him, really for everyone in the country, but it's close to your heart. You were talking about the First Amendment, and I wonder if that it doesn't give cover to the protests currently happening on college campuses. So
it does. Yeah, look,
you must have known that was going to raise some eyebrows.
Yeah, look, it's not even a close call. First Amendment. Really, what the protesters are arguing is that it relates to the spirit of the First Amendment. What they're really, because there is no First Amendment argument that you go take over a building. There are, in the First Amendment is not absolute, right? Libel laws, right? You can say something and get sued over it, and you can't say, well, it was my First Amendment right to say it. Well,
but the very same building at Columbia was taken over in the 60s, and Kent State and
but it doesn't change.
College campuses have been the home to many protests for many years, and they've actually for many times. I'm not saying in this instance. Obviously I'm playing devil's advocate
Yeah.
here just to get the counter argument. For many, many years, and most of the time, not all of the time, they've been on the right side of history. They protested against the Vietnam War, civil rights for African Americans and for women, and and even for Jewish people, against anti-Semitism.
So two separate issues, right? One, is this cause just? And number two are the legal, because no matter what the cause is, just or unjust, there is no First Amendment protection to taking over a building, period. It's not close. Now, the question of whether the cause is just, look, I think it does a disservice to the previous causes you mentioned to lump this one in with it. This is a much more, at the least, it's a much more two-sided, controversial question. There shouldn't have been two sides by the late 60s to the civil rights movement. All right. And considering how much was hid from the public when it comes to the Vietnam War, in retrospect, those weren't close calls in retrospect. There is no way we're going to look back on this and say, oh my goodness, we all got it. We know the facts. We know the dispute. There are two sides to this. I have my own views of exactly what's happening, but that's not even the point with regard to the constitutional analysis. There are, in the First Amendment, there are what are called time, place, and manner restrictions, right? It's why you need to get a permit to have a parade. It's why you can't just camp out in a park and decide we're going to take over this park for whatever cause. The police can go in there and clear out a park so other people can use it. Same thing exists here. So time, place, and manner. You're allowed to protest. It's not about what they're protesting that is the issue. I fully support their right to protest. I was very upset at USC for canceling their graduation because a pro-Palestinian woman was going to be the speaker at the
valedictorian
event.
Speaker.
Yeah. Sorry, the valedictorian at the event. I thought it was ridiculous that they were canceling it. Even though I disagree with what she believes on the Palestinian issue, I feel much more strongly about her right to say it. But that's different than saying we should be able to effectively prevent other students from enjoying their classes, from using a building. You just can't do it. It's not a close call.
Yeah. Listen, we have very similar views on this. I'm not sure if I'm with you on the, whether it's protected or not. Listen, the Charlottesville guys, right? Remember that Jews will not replace us. They were able to march because they got a permit. So you're right on that. Yeah. I agree with the people's, everyone's right to protest. The minute it becomes violent and the minute you start, destructing property, then that's where your First Amendment ends, I believe. And I believe that it also does a disservice to the cause that you're trying to bring light to. I agree.
Totally agree with you. And you know what else? I wish more people were intellectually consistent about it, right? Yeah. People and I think you agree with me on this, I felt this way during the BLM protests. You start breaking things and you get violent, you ought to go to prison. You did this in the Capitol riot, you break windows, you get violent, you attack our police officers. The notion that people are defending those January 6th, those particular aspect of the rioters, there's got to be a consistent position. And my position across the board is you break the windows, you attack the police officers, you go to jail, period.
Dan, let me ask you, where do you fall on this? Because I was conflicted about this one. You saw the Ole Miss guys, right? With the black woman and doing the monkey sounds and whatever. Listen, they have the right to protest. They have the right to. But where do you fall on that one with those guys yelling, Yeah.
So it's absolutely their right to be racist, right? You are allowed to be an anti-Semite. You're allowed to be a racist. The question becomes, should the school take action against people? That's for them to decide if it violates particular rules that a university has. It's easier for a private university than at a public university to have a private university can kind of have whatever rules it wants. A public university is effectively an arm of the government, and so they have to be a little more careful constitutionally, et cetera. But again, people are allowed to be horrible human beings, and they're allowed to talk about how horrible they are.
I thought what I thought about then was, you remember when the Harvard students, had their protests, and people were calling them anti-Semites, and they were doxing the students and saying, we don't want to hire them. Bill Ackman was in on that. I was a bit conflicted about that. And I'm wondering, should the Ole Miss students face the same or similar consequences? Now, I believe that students are not quite evolved and matured yet, and that they're at an institution of higher learning because they're supposed to be learning critical thinking. They should be given a wide berth to exercise their First Amendment right of freedom of expression and to be able to think independently. I don't think that you should be doxing students or promising not to hire them or affecting their careers, because young people do silly things that they may not believe when they become 30, 40, and 50 years old.
I think that the key there is, how did they deal with it after the fact, right? I mean, if someone wants to apologize and say, I made a mistake here, I shouldn't have said that, particularly for a student, I think that should matter, right? The problem is we're not seeing a lot of that, right? We're seeing more digging in. People just sort of saying, I'm not going to apologize, or, ignoring it and getting support from other folks based on, what they're doing. But First Amendment rights are different from, is it the right thing to do?
Yeah. We have very similar sentiments and thoughts on this, Dan. I'm shocked.
Yeah. I guess I'm surprised too. I mean, so Don, you think that you agree that the protesters who, the minute, look, here, I'll give you a tougher one. All right. So when the protesters lock arms, right, they are forcing the police to go hands-on. Right. When they know they're going to be arrested and they lock arms, that makes me nuts, because then the police have to actually go in there, get hands-on, break their arms apart, and then there's the, quote, potential for violence. Yeah. I think that's terrible. Do you agree with me on that?
I'll give you my simple answer, is that anyone who has SWAT or riot gear and a gun, I'm going to get out of their way. That's my answer to that.
Well, that should be the answer. Yeah.
Dan, we started this. You were asking me about being an entrepreneur, and I said you're a man of many talents and you wear many hats. As a reporter, an anchor, an analyst, a host, an executive, where do you see this? Your show on NewsNation. Where do you see this industry going? What's the future of this industry?
It's more the Don Lemon show, really. I mean, it is more individuals who have followings, having their own products. It started with social media, right? We said social media is beginning to fracture the old media. It's becoming more and more fractured. People are given more and more choices, and they don't have to, tune in to CNN to see the lineup of what they have. They can go to the particular person that they like, and get that. And it doesn't have to be at 10 o'clock at night at a particular time.
But also the clips of everything that's happening, they get them in real time online from the New York Times, from the NewsNation website, from, the Hill or the Washington Post. Everyone has a video segment on their website, whether it's a print media or broadcast media, and everyone's getting all the same information, and through social media, on TikTok, on Instagram, on Twitter. And so it's saturated, but a lot of people are getting their news from streaming now. So, that's
and I think that's just going to happen more and more. Look, my business Law and Crime, which I recently sold, was a very big part of it was our YouTube business. We have a live network, right? That's on cable TV. We have a big production arm. Our YouTube business is what we were focused on. It was massive. It still is, in terms of the following and the engagement and the passion. I mean, during the Johnny Depp verdict, and we were a half to a third of the size we are now, we had 3.5 million concurrent users watching on our YouTube page. If we were the size we are now, we might have had 7 million. I mean, wow. That's more than almost any cable channels get. That's my point, is the world has changed. You're in the right place for the future.
Listen, and that's even the broadcast channels. The thing, listen, I'm a baby. I'm just growing. And it's funny, I get so much criticism from the right. Oh, look at Don Lemon, look at his show. It's like, I'm not worrying about that. I'm in a growing period. I'm having a great time. I'm learning. I'm trying new things. And you said during the Johnny Depp trial, you had 3 million, whatever. That was what, 2 years ago? Now you have 7 million.
Right.
It takes time to grow. It's a grassroots thing, and I'm having fun doing it. So I appreciate your support. I appreciate what you're saying. Thank you very much.
Yeah, and look at all the big names who are. There's a reason that all these big names are doing their own thing, and the reason is because the audience is clamoring for it, and they don't need to have the mainstream media entities as their only choices. And I think that's going to happen more and more and more.
Yeah, Donald Trump is going to have to call out a lot more people than the lamestream media, the fake news media.
He's going to be specific. He's going to name check Don Lemon even more than he already has.
Dan Abrams, always a pleasure, my friend. Please come back, and I'll be listening. Make sure you listen to Dan Abrams' show every day. What time Eastern is it? 1 o'clock Eastern?
The Sirius XM show is at 2 p.m. And the NewsNation show is at 9 p.m.
At 9 p.m. Dan, thank you very much. Best of luck. I'll see you soon.
Thanks, Don. Good to see you.
You too. Thanks for watching The Don Lemon Show. Make sure you click on the image in the top right to subscribe to my channel and the thumbnail in the bottom right to watch more content from my show. And I'll see you next time.